Hello tanks and tankettes, welcome to a preview video, and today I'm actually looking at two of the three upcoming premiums that we're going to see. Now the Scorpion I know is definitely coming in September. Well, Quickie Baby said it is, and unless his sources are drastically wrong, I am going to go with that. He wouldn't have put it out if it hadn't been confirmed somewhere. And the Kanonenjagdpanzer, well, I'm not quite sure when that's coming out, but again, it'll be sometime in the relatively near future. These two and the third tank, which actually I don't know when this video is going out, so I won't tell you what it is yet. I might put this out before the deadline when I can talk about the third tank. But anyway, I have confirmed with Wargaming, well, Wargaming EU anyway, this might not apply to other servers, but it probably will. All three of them are going to be basically limited time offers. You're not going to be able to get these as regular things on the tech trees. They're just going to be available from the website shop. Whether that means bundles or not, I have no information. I asked, was told that they had no more information to give me beyond what had already been given. So I know that they are going to be available through the website shop, not in game, which therefore means that the Kanonenjagdpanzer can't be the replacement for the Jagdtiger 8.8. But there is another, and we will possibly quickly look in Tank Inspector at some point, but there is actually another in the files German premium tank destroyer. And that looks like actually it's much more likely to be the permanent replacement for the Jagdtiger. So this is not, basically. So we're going to start off with the Scorpion. You might wonder why I've got a Churchill in this lineup as well. You'll see. The Scorpion is, well, small, except not that small. It is quite short, and as you can see from the rather eye-catching of 111, it has almost about the same armour, in fact probably less effective armour than your average family hatchback. It is actually, and I'll compare it to the Churchill 3 because most of you will have seen a Churchill 3. In terms of its height, it's not that small, but I think the camo value on it is going to be fairly good anyway because it's a rather compact vehicle. Now it's very tempting to compare this to the E25, which another compact vehicle, obviously lower than this even. It's probably about the size of the hull, maybe just a little bit over. But it really isn't. Now one thing both these machines have in common is they're both papery TDs. They've both got 90mm guns. But this one is actually, I think, a 90mm gun that you don't see on other machines. Although it might be. If it is, I haven't spotted it. It might appear on a machine I've not played, but it isn't to my knowledge on any of the other American tank destroyers. So stat-wise, it's not bad. 219 average pen. And bear in mind, this is a tier 7 tank destroyer with regular matchmaking. All of the three new prems are going to have regular matchmaking. They've put limited matchmaking as it's a thing of the past at this point. But with its semi-turning turret, it's got 60 degrees, so it's 30 either way. It has 0.33 accuracy or 0.33 dispersion and a 2-second aim time, which is pretty good. And I think, given the nature of the gun, that's a nice amount of accuracy to have. The penetration is workable at tier 7 on a tank destroyer. The actual shell damage, a little underwhelming, but it's a 90mm gun, and I think overall, for a tier 7 tank destroyer, that's a fairly nice, reliable set of stats. Now, there's also obviously some that you don't get in the garage that I've looked up in Tank Inspector, which I will give you. It has 275 penetration with its heat. Actually, you can see that there. What am I talking about? It has got a DPM of 1925 without a gun rammer. With a gun rammer, obviously, that will increase. It has a view range of 350 meters, so you're going to need, I put binoculars on it because it is the kind of machine that you're just going to take and sit in a bush somewhere, as is the Kanonenjagdpanzer. The power to weight ratio is an astonishing 28. It's got 28 horsepower per ton because it is tiny and it is basically made of biscuit tins. But the max speed is 45 kilometers an hour. So you will get up to that max speed really quickly, but then you're just going to trundle along at that 45 kilometers an hour. So it feels nimble, but it doesn't feel fast. However, that excellent power to weight means it's very good for tackling slopes and whatever. So I would still say, even though the top speed is not especially impressive, it's still it's decent. I mean, for a tier 7 tank destroyer, it's very decent, but it's not E25 levels of, you know, running around the battlefield. But it's the power to weight ratio that makes it really feel properly nimble. However, there is one big fly in the ointment there, and that's the reverse speed, which is only 12, and that has felt like the biggest drawback of this to me out of all the stats, because there's a lot of times when you want to use the gun depression, which is good, by the way, -10 gun depression on this. It is very good at peeking over things, but then pulling back after you've been peeking over things, that's a bit problematic when you've only got 12 kilometers reverse, and that has caught me out a couple of times where I've tried to make use of that sort of peek and shoot, and I've just been hit for my troubles. And because your armor is almost non-existent, it is by far the least armored vehicle in the game, it takes a lot of module damage and a lot of crew damage when you get hit. So you really, really want to avoid getting hit if at all possible. So that's why that reverse speed is a bit of a problem. The other thing that isn't quite so impressive is the turret traverse. Now, like I said, it's got a fixed forward firing arc, 60 degrees, which is, I think that's as good as the 80-15, if not better. But the actual time it takes to traverse that, it's 12.5 degrees a second, so it's not particularly fast. There are a lot of times when you're going to want to traverse the hull to get your gun around quicker, but the problem with that is, whilst the soft stats, the bloom when you're just traversing the turret is pretty decent, when you actually then traverse the hull as well, the bloom gets pretty damn horrible. So you want to try and avoid traversing the hull when you're trying to aim if possible, but sometimes it's unavoidable, at which point, yeah, it gets a bit nasty. But the aim time of 2 seconds though, I mean, dispersion of 3.3, honestly, that is all livable with. The one thing I would like to see buffed, if possible, because I will say, I don't know, I probably should have said at the start, the stats I'm talking about may be subject to change. These might not be quite the final stats. The one thing I would like to see buffed is another, say, 6, 7, 8 kilometers on the reverse speed. And that would make it feel a lot more comfortable in some situations, because, you know, I'm going to put my biases on my sleeve here, if that makes any sense, in that both of these machines are paper thin tank destroyers, and that means that you have to be super passive a lot of the time, and that does not suit me at all as a play style. So bear that bias in mind when I'm talking about these things. But I think even so, having said that, even though it is for the most part a super passive, small, not particularly hard hitting but fairly reliably hitting tank destroyer, I think it's alright. I think for what tier 7 TDs cost, this one's probably going to be worth your money. Then we come on to the tier 8 effort, the Kanonenjagdpanzer, or I'm just gonna call it the K-Panzer. It's easier. Now again, the temptation is to compare it to the E25, but it is really not a lot like the E25 in any way, shape or form. So we'll do a quick size comparison with the Churchill, and you'll see that although it is rather flat, it's actually not that short. It's almost as tall as the Churchill. It's maybe a half a meter shorter. It's not a lot. And I found actually, although the camo value on the Scorpion seemed to be rather good, the camo value on the Kanonenjagdpanzer just, I was getting spotted at some very odd times, and it doesn't help that Wargaming gave us all these accounts with basically 100% stock crews. I mean, it's nice having 100% crew, okay, but if you were really going to play with these things, unless you'd literally never played up the relevant tank destroyer line before, you'd have a crew with at least six cents in it, and that has been a bit of a problem when I've been trying to play these things. So I don't know exactly when I've been spotted or not, but obviously if someone starts shooting at you, you are spotted. So that has happened a lot more often than I would have liked in the Kanonenjagdpanzer. It's also, despite having a whole 30 times the armour of the M56 Scorpion, 30 armour's nothing. HE shells, even the HE shells of this, right, 90mm, I can't even say it, 90mm HE shells, 45mm of pen. This has got 30 mil of sloped armor, so it's nothing, especially for a tier 8. Now, mobility I'm going to talk about first with this, because the mobility is the good point of this machine. It is actually pretty nimble. Now, it doesn't have the crazy good power to weight ratio of the M56 Scorpion, but it's still pretty respectable. It's just under 19.5 horsepower per ton. It goes forward at 70, although in practice I've only hit those speeds really going downhill. Most of the time you're kind of bubbling along between 50 and 60. And the reverse speed is a very nice 20, so unlike the M56, you can do those peaking maneuvers and pull back a lot more safely. And actually, it's also still got decent gun depression. It's -8 versus -10, so that's still a viable maneuver. It is something that you can do with this machine. However, there's the 44 degrees of hull traverse, but that's about as much as I have to say that's good about this machine. I mean, the rest of it is frankly not so good, and I've already said that I don't feel like the camo factor of this is very good. Those are all hidden numbers. I don't get to see those. But as for the rest of it, this is supposedly the same gun that you get on the RU-251. Now, there are some things where it's better than that gun. It's got more pen, it's got better accuracy, and it's got better aim time. However, the RU-251 has, across the board, better soft stats, like basically the bloom when you're moving the machine around. It's also got better DPM. The fact that the tier 8 Scout with this supposed gun has better DPM than the and soft stats than the fixed casement tank destroyer. I mean the whole the point of trading off a turret in a tank destroyer is that your gun handling and your rate of fire and all those soft stats are better in theory, and this is completely the opposite way around. Like I've said, the only things that are better are the aim time, which is good, 2 seconds again. 0.35 dispersion is it's alright, but not really good enough considering the nature of the gun. And the fact that it's got worse DPM than the RU-251 as it is at the moment, that just does not stand up at all. That makes no sense. I mean, the DPM is not terrible, just under 2400. It's okay, but it should not have worse DPM than the RU-251. That makes no sense to me at all. And the soft stats being worse makes even less sense. So there's that. There's also the fact that this is a very fragile tier 8 tank destroyer with by far the worst pen and damage of any tier 8 tank destroyer now that the Jagdtiger 8.8 isn't in the game. And crucially, this has full matchmaking, unlike the Jagdtiger 8.8. It is a profoundly disappointing gun, to be honest. There is very little kind of upside to having all that mobility when the gun that you are carrying around is so badly lackluster. Now, there is one obvious fix for this: make it a tier 7. I don't know why they're selling this as a tier 8. It could have the gun stats it has with maybe slightly reduced rate of fire as a tier 7, and it would be fine. As it is, I noticed a very interesting thing when I was looking through Tank Inspector. Now, the figure of 212 pen and 240 average damage might seem very familiar to you if you've ever played with any of the French 90mm. The only real significant difference is that the HE shells have 102 pen, which I think is the same on the RU, and this obviously has heat shells, which the French 90mm don't have. But I had a hunch, so I looked up the French regular tier 8 tank destroyer, the AC-48. I put on its stock 90mm gun, and lo and behold, the stats are largely identical, apart from the fact that this has slower AP shells. The DPM, the reload, obviously the damage and the alpha, they're all the same. So basically, you are in a faster but way less armoured AC-48. That's what this thing is. It is a stock AC-48 that moves around better but has terrible armor by comparison. And the AC-48 is not known for having great armor, but it's 150 sloped frontal. It's not bad. And obviously, it being a regular tank, some of its other stats are better as well. I think it's got better view range. I can't remember. But yeah, for a tier 8 tank destroyer, no, this is in no way worth your money for the price that it's going to be as a tier 8 tank destroyer. If it was a tier 7 tank destroyer, then I would say, okay, that's more acceptable. But for this machine that sees tier 10s, no, you can't trade with higher tiers, not with 240 alpha. You don't have the DPM to make up for it. The accuracy is actually, although 0.35 is not bad, it's not good enough. The gun handling stats should not be worse than an RU-251, so on the whole, definitely give this a miss. Wait for some of the other German premium TDs to come along, because there is one in the tech tree already at tier 7, there's another one at tier 8, as I've already said, so absolutely no. I don't even know what they're going to charge for it, but I can already tell you it's not worth your money. So, all that said, we're going to have some actual examples of gameplay. Honestly, I was not able to have particularly great games in either machine. I had a more fun time in the Scorpion, but in the Kanonenjagdpanzer, well, I don't think I can... I will put up an edited screenshot of the stats of the vehicle, so I'm not accidentally showing you the third vehicle, which you probably will already know about when you see this, but I'm just playing it safe here. I don't want to get into trouble with wargaming. But yeah, I had, I think, a 40% win rate in this. It is just utterly inadequate as a tier 8. You can't carry teams, you can't do well in it. And I don't like machines like that, where you are left dependent on your teams, especially when you're in a tier 10 battle and you are just sat twiddling your thumbs at the back, knowing that you are basically filler, that you can't make any particular difference either way. It's not a good experience. So, yes, let's get on to some gameplay. So we're going to start off with the M56 games, and you'll see here right away that power to weight ratio in action. I'm easily keeping pace with these mediums and scouts going uphill here. So the matchmaking for this was pretty good, this particular battle. Technically tier 8, but only a couple per team. And actually, I have to say, being lower tier, not being top tier in the Scorpion, was alright, and I seem to get better matchmaking overall, but of course that is just luck of the draw, literally. The tier 10 battles I was in with the K-Panzer were generally much more painful, and there were definitely more of them, unfortunately. So I'm going to set myself up behind this bush for cover, and I will say, all three replays, I don't think I was playing at my best. I was a bit frustrated because I knew I had to sit down. I had to play these machines, even though I wasn't massively enjoying them. I mean, the M56 I think was the most enjoyable of them, but it was utterly compounded by the fact that the teams I was getting, for the most part, just made me want to weep. I spent, in particular, 3 hours on the Saturday just gone, just playing battle after battle where I just could not believe the teammates I was getting, and just the nature of the machines means that it is very hard to carry very bad teams because you only have your health to trade. You don't have any armor to rely on. And because you've only got so many hit points, and in the case of the Scorpion here, the M56, because your tank, your machine is so prone to module damage as well, you go down pretty quickly if there are more than one or two machines firing at you. So I've come up here for obvious reasons. I mean, it's probably the best place to sit and perch with a fragile TD and snipe down. But meanwhile, our only tier 8, the Lurver, well, he's gone down fighting, but that was a terrible shot. He has unfortunately just been overwhelmed by the enemies up along the B line because he had very little backup at all. We're ahead on numbers just now, but they do still have more of their tough tier 8s in the battle. I mean, we've got a T-34-2, not the best regarded machine. There's also a Jagdtiger 8.8, which, again, this is the place to be up here in that sort of thing. And if you compare actually the Jagdtiger 8.8 to the K-Panzer directly, the Jagdtiger 8.8 actually comes off, in terms of its gun, better in almost every regard except for the extra penetration. I think it's what, 10 extra pen on the K-Panzer. And for that, you no longer have limited matchmaking. But otherwise, the gun handling, the accuracy, the DPM, they're all better on the Jagdtiger. So yeah, it's a bit of a bad trade, really. So we've lost control of the north, but that doesn't necessarily matter. Now, we've got a bunch of tanks threatening their cap, and one of our tier 8s is with them, so the IS-6 has gone back. But I'm still going to be a bit wary, because obviously anything cannon will hurt me. And the KV-2 especially, oh boy, that could hurt. Actually, you'll notice I'm using Cola on this. The only times I've been set on fire have just been regular AP hits. I don't think I've especially been set on fire a lot by HE, but of course this is at the stage where everyone's going, Scorpion, what's that? Nobody knows that if you see one of these, you shoot HE at it because you're going to really hurt it. The gun shield actually is 5 armor, so technically a little bit more than the hull, but yeah, any and all HE in the game is going to hurt this so badly, so that's why I was being wary. You're also going to see me waste a few AP shells on this, and this actually has not that much ammo to waste, I have to say. Although the fact that, I mean, it's got enough ammo, you're not going to run out. It's not like the E25 where you fire super fast and your ammo's all gone in like 4 minutes. But you do have to be wary about spending it on knocking down obstacles, and obviously on this particular map there are a lot of destructible objects, destructible houses in the cap circles, so didn't have a lot of choice here. One other downside I'll say of both these machines having heat ammo for their premium, while we're on the subject of the gun, is that there are certain, particularly Russian tanks where, because they've got spaced armor, and some of the Chinese as well, where honestly it would be preferable to have a PCR. And the extra pen this gets, 275 on a tier 7 with premium, that's pretty good. But you have to be extra careful, and if you get side shots on a lot of machines, it'd be, with a PCR it'd be like, penetrations for days, but with the heat ammo there's a very good chance it'll go in the tracks and do nothing. And even if you're aiming above the tracks, if it's an IS-3 or an IS-6, then it may well still do nothing because it's spaced armor. So the battle's nearly done. The team that were over near the cap have managed to do a good job clearing up. There's just the T-28 Pro and this IS left, and it's at this point I make a mistake. I think, okay, I'm fast enough to chase down this IS, get behind him, put some shots in his rear. I'm actually not. I should have gone round the other way, and then I would have had a couple of shots at his front, but as it was, I got fooled into thinking, yeah, I've got enough speed for this. I really didn't. Like I've said, it trundles along at 45 kph really well, but it is not an E25. It cannot perform those maneuvers. But it's good enough in a lot of circumstances. So I actually did more damage there than was on the clock. I had a couple of blind shots, so nearly 2,000 damage. Second place on the team, which is not bad. Our T-34-2 did alright. The SB-1C did alright. Yeah, nothing to complain about there, really. And because the AP, as with all the premiums that use AP shells, is pretty cheap. Unless you're firing a lot of premium, it is actually an okay moneymaker. I won't say it's as good as the Jagdtiger 8.8 was, but still, not bad. So, second match, and you're about to see a demonstration of just how light this machine is. Yep, that took 2 goes. Now, again, a tier 8 game, and in theory slightly worse, but in practice, it's what, 1 extra tier 8 per side, so it doesn't really matter. This is the new and improved Swamp, and yes, honestly, it is the best version of Swamp we've ever had in the game, but it's still not super great. But I have very little experience of playing fragile, campy tank destroyers on this map, so I've seen other people sit up here with their tank destroyers. I figured this might be a good place to start out, but after about a minute of trying to get shots on the stuff that is down there from the enemy team, I decided, okay, that's just not happening. Can't get shots from here unless they're then pushing down that flank. So you're going to see some pretty bad shooting from me in the next 30 seconds or so. I do take out the ELC, and I think that's a bit of a lucky shot. And then this is just terrible. Yeah, he's clearly moving. Why didn't I lead that? I don't know. And it's one of those machines where, I mean, the accuracy is good. I think, what did I say, 0.33? I mean, for this kind of shooting, yeah, RNG just ate that one. It will occasionally eat your shots, even with 0.33 accuracy, but it's really nothing to be complained about. If you're not shooting like a total noob, as I was, then that is going to be more than enough, I think, for the majority of your hits to go where you want them to go. And I actually have to say, in some ways, this has the better gun than the K-Panzer. It's got slightly more penetration, it's got faster AP shells, the rate of fire is not as good, but the accuracy is better. So why that to tier 8 and this is the tier 7? I don't know. By that logic, maybe this should be a tier 8, or actually, no, it shouldn't. That would make it suck. Really, the K-Panzer should be a tier 7. It should be. And I hope they drop it to tier 7. It has no place at tier 8. It would need such buffs as to be then basically an E25 at tier 8. And Wargaming do not want that again. So I'm getting a little bit of damage here, but it's after everybody's died. And I think I'm learning why this is not particularly a great spot for a tank destroyer, because the only time that you're going to get clear shots down that flank is when your teammates have already all collapsed. On the other side, the 890 line actually, well, we had a lot of our top tiers there. They've actually pushed through, and it'd be profoundly disappointing if they hadn't. But there's one, in particular, the KV4, as you'll see on that minimap, who just spends quite a lot of time milling around. And I was hoping he'd either come back here or he'd go down with the push down to their cap and draw the enemy team down there. Instead, he just faffs and kind of drives around in circles. So, little PSA, don't do that in your top tier heavy tank. Sightseeing is all well and good, but when you have matchmaking like this, when you're a top tier, you have to actually do something. You can't just aimlessly mill around on a section of the map. Fortunately, that was just him. It wasn't most of our team. And also, fortunately, I was slightly worried about the FCM coming to our cap, at which point I'd have been in trouble, because we've got me and 2 rather damaged scouts. But it is actually just the enemy scouts that continue to our cap, and I've already put a shot into that Walker Bulldog. I was a little cautious about doing it, but their artillery's already done. They don't have any derp machines nearby that I have to worry about, so it's fine. I mean, if the M41 got the drop on me, then that'd be a problem, but I know exactly where he is. There are multiple tanks with their guns faced at him, and he actually stops to take a shot at me, which makes my job particularly easy there. And the VK, having just taken a hit, then is able to, there we go, nicely take out the T-37. So the only remaining tanks now are in the south. And this is where, again, the E-25 would have been able to get there a lot faster, but this is still fast enough. And it's actually maybe comparable to the British Centurions in that regard, in that, yeah, they only go 40, but sometimes the power to weight ratio is pretty useful. And in this case, I mean, look at this. This is kind of boggy, slow ground. But I'm maintaining that 45 kph. There you go, that Walker Bulldog just going meep meep. You're never going to keep up with a scout, at least on level ground or going downhill. But going uphill, certainly I think you will. So there are times and occasions when that is going to be useful. And I am actually going to be here in time to do some more damage, so that's also nice. The mobility is good enough. So you're going to get to see some shooting on the move here, or kind of almost snapshotting, because I figure this shot here, okay, broadside of the Jagdtiger 8.8, he's filling, what, 75% of the reticle when I took that shot? No. You really do want to be stationary when you're firing, if at all possible. It does not seem to like firing on the move at all, and that's a little bit disappointing, but there are worse sort of soft stats to have. It is actually going to cost me some health though, because again I make that kind of move, that kind of shot on the AMX M4, and oh, apologies, I just bashed the mic stand there. But I figure, okay, there's a whole bunch of tanks around here. That guy's super low health. No, I'm actually going to have to shoot him, and that shot took out my engine. And the FCM actually is also, despite the fact you could get a kill from somebody, goes for me again. So anyway, but again, nearly 2,000 damage. No Confederate this time. But yeah, it felt comfortable. But the thing about both those games is, and it's going to be true for the K-Panzer game as well, the teams were good enough. I wasn't in a position where I was having to try and do above my weight. I was able to support the teams very well. And as you can see, third from the top, our VK Scout actually did all right for himself there. But yeah, despite the fact that our KV4 in that game was absolutely terrible, he was way down the team list, despite the fact that we were effectively a tier 8 heavy down, it didn't matter. The enemy team was comparatively weak enough to our team that it was pretty comfortable. If it's the other way around, if the enemy team is, I mean, if it's much more evenly matched, then you might have a problem, because he can't take the hits. And that's exactly true of the K-Panzer as well. Now, I've only got one game for you, and it's a pretty short one, because in the 30-odd battles I had, the most I ever managed was 3,000 damage, which is okay for this gun. But it was on a crushing loss, and I just had loss after loss after loss. And having double-checked the win rate, it wasn't quite as bad as 40%, it was only 44%, but that's still pretty bad. And yes, it's only over 30-odd battles, but it had by far the lowest average XP per battle of the three. I cannot understand why this is a tier 8. I absolutely don't get it at all. Somebody's gone, okay, we need a tier 8 premium German tank destroyer, and they've come up with this, and it's a bit confusing because the other Scorpion, the German Scorpion, is way better in terms of firepower. It is basically a Waffenträger. It's got the 128mm gun, much heavier hitting. Again, a very papery machine, but it has a turret, or at least a rotating superstructure. So this, no, it absolutely should not be. So I'm making sure I'm very firmly behind cover here. I mean, the IS-3, this is a top tier game, and I'm taking advantage of the fact that he's not angling very well against me. But even so, this is the part where the .35 accuracy feels a little bit painful. But because he's angled suboptimally, it means I can get the side of his beak. But even so, I'm still getting shots into his tracks when I don't want to get shots into his tracks. It's not good enough for the rest of the stats of the gun, the accuracy, for a tier 8. Absolutely not. He also hit me, and I don't know if that was just a blind shot, if I was genuinely spotted there, because he's still trying to fire at me, and it might just be guesswork. He might have just gone, okay, I'm getting shot from that clump of bushes, I'm going to fire in that direction. That's the kind of time when having Sixth Sense would have been super useful to be able to determine if that was just him correctly deducing where I was shooting from, or if I was actually spotted there. But there were multiple times I had with this machine where I was sitting behind bushes. I was thinking, okay, I'm letting other people spot for me, I'm not going to get seen, I'm far back enough, and somehow I got seen anyway. And 30mm of frontal armour, even when you're top tier, is absolutely nothing. Everything you can meet from the tier 4 scouts up to, well, would it be tier 5 scouts these days? I think it would. To the meanest, nastiest tier 10 is just going to wreck you with only 30 armour. So I'm trying to help out this Ferdy here. Again, in theory, I'm not spotted, but even if I were, it wouldn't matter. They've got other priorities. And I think the fact that I helped, that I stopped that guy and was able to track him and stop him flanking the Ferdy meant that the Ferdy was then left alive. But again, this match was one where our team was, and I was able to contribute, you know, I took a big chunk of health out of that IS-3 at the start, but if it had been a much closer fight, and I had lots of games where there were either much closer fights or just runaway losses, and I just felt really rather helpless. There wasn't a lot I could do. Now this was maybe a bit overcautious, I possibly could have got some damage out of that guy, but this was basically a rollicking win for us. And that's the only times I ever had sort of okay games in this, where it was going to be a win anyway. I don't think there are any matches I can think of that I had where it was like, well, I definitely turned the tide of this battle. It's just not that kind of machine. At least it didn't feel that way to me. So this is nearly done. I've done, again, nearly 2k damage, and this was a game I picked out because it was by far the least mediocre of the games I had. I mean, they were all either games where I just went, meh, that was super campy and nothing happened, and our tier 10s did all the work and I wasn't able to do anything, because if I had, I'd have just been punished hard. Or else they were crushing defeats where I basically couldn't do anything to swing it either way. So, yeah, it's not tier 8 material, it's just not. Make it a tier 7, it's that simple. But, again, it makes okay money. As a crew trainer, and I haven't talked about this, as a crew trainer, it's actually inferior to the Jagdtiger 8.8, and especially considering that a lot of the German TDs use up to 6 crew members, this can only train 4. So that is yet another disadvantage of this machine, that it can only train 4 crew members. So that is another strike against it. You know, the Scorpion has exactly the same problem, to be honest. It can only take 4 crew members, but that's less of an issue with a lot of the mid tiers anyway of the American TDs. But once you get to the higher tiers, some of them, yeah, they do need kind of 5 and 6 crew members as well, but there's not as many of them, crucially. So that's it. It's a pity I don't have anything better to say about the Kanonenjagdpanzer, but honestly, with the fact that the limited matchmaking is now no longer a thing, Wargaming have been continuing to put out machines where previously they would have had limited matchmaking. They are balanced exactly the same, but now they don't, and so therefore are objectively worse. And given that these are machines they want you to pay actual money for, no, they need to balance these machines differently. If they're going to take a decision like no more limited matchmaking, then that has to be reflected with the kind of premiums you are then offering. It so does not feel like it with the K-Panzer at all. This feels like 12 months ago, this would have been a limited matchmaking machine, definitely. Now it's not, and so therefore it's not worth your money at all. The M56, though, as I've said, good enough. I don't think it's OP. I think it's a pleasant little machine to play, and the fact that it's the first of the American TDs. Obviously, there's the T28 HTC, but that's not actually a premium. That's a reward tank. Yeah, it's all right, and I actually would hope that becomes one that you can buy in the tech tree, because that is a serious lack for the American TD line, the fact that they don't have any crew trainers that you can buy. So there you go. There is going to be another preview video very shortly of the mystery third tank, possibly the day after tomorrow. You probably know what it already is. It's got on sale, actually, in NA of recording this today, but I still can't say the name, I don't think, because, you know, that's just how this works. But, yeah, well, I'll not spoil it for you, but, again, yeah, that gives you some level of how I feel about the mystery machine. So anyway, if you enjoyed this preview, and I hope you found it useful, you can leave any comments below, you can hit the like button, you can subscribe to my channel, and as always, stay tuned for more.